introduction to Audible. I guess you guys all know this is about audiobooks. However, we'll start with where does actually audio as a content stand in the entire streaming business? So far we have seen music largely. We have seen radios going online, and now we see audiobooks. So Shailesh, how would you put audio in streaming business?
Thank you. Look, I think Audible, at least as of now, we're a subscription-only service. We are based in India almost entirely on the book format and an extension of the book format, or books as a medium and audio being another format to consume books. I think as you bring out audio's role in the overall entertainment and infotainment space, you have to consider the ambit also of podcasts or audio series, whatever the terminology is or how people understand it. More episodic, more short form content, whether it goes into the UGC space or not, that's secondary. But that audio as a medium on digital is growing really fast. If I look at just audiobooks in particular, that's been the only format in the publishing space that's actually been growing. And of course, I speak about the more developed markets, US, where all these formats have been around for a while. If you go outside audiobooks and you look at audio as a whole, I think it's about 20 to 26% of all audio consumed is now spoken audio. So the balance being 74%, or obviously still being dominant in terms of music. So that really is kind of showcasing the potential and the really rapid rise of audio and how people are taking to this whole format and medium of audio, as well as podcasts and audio series.
Is India a very important market from the perspective that we still have a rising literacy rate, and probably here a service like Audible can make a huge play, given that your books are audiobooks, and you also have at times author narrating the books, right? So when you draw a content strategy, what are the things that you keep in mind?
So from a content strategy perspective, yeah, I guess as you look at who's the consumer, and for a subscription service and a books-based service, I think what's been really interesting for us to see and observe is that people who have never even or aren't as familiar or accustomed to reading are actually coming on to audiobooks altogether. I've met so many people personally who've come up and told me, this is a great service. This is a really good experience, and it's helped me start to read books which I would have otherwise never gotten around to doing. So is the audience really kind of the 15 million people that we think would pay for OTT services, which is a number that's been widely published, or is it something smaller? We don't know from an infotainment and from a knowledge consumption point of view. I guess if you take a wider lens and if you look at entertainment as a whole, and that's really guided by the business model, whether it's subscription or whether it's advertising or whether it's some sort of a freemium play. Obviously, you can look at a much wider audience. Maybe perhaps not as much as an MX player, but in time. And we've been accustomed to this whole idea and act of listening, Indian culture, or even an extension of radio, going on demand, from a content and from a consumption point of view. So that's, there's a wide set of audience that we can tap into. But I guess from a content strategy perspective, there will be a segment of paying customers that would value really premium content. So whether it is content that's based off a book and really good quality writing, whether it's international or local, or stuff that's complemented by a celebrity narrator to add more drama and more of an engaging experience and an intimate experience with the user. Or it is something created fresh from the ground up that is more culturally nuanced or more entertainment oriented. So I guess the content strategy would have to look at who the customer is, what's the opportunity to monetize or scale, either or one leading to the other.
So two questions. A, how to choose your narrators? Do you, when you choose a narrator, do you keep in mind that it has to be a celebrity narrator all the time? Secondly, you said about monetization, right? Does it mean that at one point in time you will also look at creating, right now you're just narrating books, but you can have an episodic narration or you can do a podcast kind of a narration. At any point in time, you'll try to play with the content that is there on the platform?
Yeah, so I'll take the first one first. So how do we look at picking a narrator? A lot of the times, this is even a conversation with the author or with the, with the publishing company around, here's a book, here's how, here's what the narrative is. What's the potential for it to be adopted by a wide range of people? And can a celeb narrator that actually is really good at the craft as well, not just for the name or the visibility, because from an audio perspective, you don't really see the person. It's not, the visual aesthetic or the celebrity and the personality aesthetic is less important. It's the craft that they can bring into the work and into the narration. So can a celebrity narrator actually boost the experience and the intimate nature of that experience? That is a vital factor. And then, of course, like I said, working with the author to make sure there's a certain ethos matching. Does this narrator actually match the type of content or the kind of script there is and can bring life into it? So that's kind of some of the things that go into it.
And the second question?
Yeah, so if you could recall what the...
So I'm talking about to a certain extent monetization also, right?
Right.
Right now it's paid $199 per month. At any point in time, do you think you would allow advertising? Especially, there are a lot of new writers which is coming in, tying up with them for distribution of their content, something on those lines?
Yeah. So I think this goes back to the content creation part, right? And what is the right content that's suitable for India and for us to scale? Now, a lot of the content that we work with now is actually brought in from the US, UK, and the content that we're creating there from a book's perspective. We do have and we do short form content as well in other markets. We haven't launched that in India. I think it's fair to say that we would do that. It's also pretty evident, and we stated our intent a year ago when we launched, which is we will invest heavily into creating local content, whether that's short form oriented or whether that's kind of a longer arc storytelling in the form of a book. That remains to be seen, but I think reasonable to say that we will do both and everything that's required to tap into a wider audience from an India perspective. And that would include exploring and really thinking about what the right business model is, whether there's a hybrid model that can come into play. I guess at this point we're not really focused on that. It's just way too early for us to zero in and say this is exactly what we should be doing. I think we're very much into the test and learn phase. We've seen great traction on the subscription part. There's a very dedicated audience and consumer set that is seems to be pretty price inelastic and really value the kind of content from an audiobook's perspective.
So you have fiction, you have biography, right? But in India, what tends to work better for you?
Yeah, I think it's a function of the audience at this point, right? So it's if you look at working professionals or slightly mature audience, call it the 25 plus. What are they most focused on, right? They're focused on advancement, on career development, on things like parenting. So a lot of this self-development / self-improvement kind of stuff, or business and money, or how do I get better with finances. So a lot of the non-fiction stuff in these areas it tends to be really popular. Of course, I think storytelling it's in our history and our culture, so that tends to do well as well. But I think self-improvement, non-fiction does really well for us.
One last question. You're part of Amazon's product services. At any point in time, would you package yourself with Prime and sell it? Because then you become a complete service, right? I mean, it's your parent company's call, but for you, distribution will be a lot easier.
Yeah, again, I think too early to say. And like I said, I think India warrants its own strategy and its own thinking. But too early to say that, too early to kind of go in that direction. Amazon and being part of the Amazon family is of course something we greatly value. So we continue to find synergies.
What are the challenges?
I think just the fact that people don't know what the format is and how do I even understand what am I going to try. I think people are familiar with the idea of video. It's become a day-to-day thing. Having books as a frame of reference, and our first marketing campaign, which is books that speak to you, was along the lines of trying to bridge and help people understand what exactly is this. When I download this app, what am I actually getting? When I press play, what am I going to expect? So that is really the biggest challenge. I think starting something new is always along those lines.
Sure. Thank you. We just have time for one question. Is there anybody with one question?
I have a question. Most of the content that we see currently on Audible is in English. And since you mentioned you're going to be investing heavily in India to create India-specific content, I mean, do we understand that it's also going to be regional content, like vernacular content?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hindi is obviously the start and would be the focus to begin with. I think when we look at and we think about regional, what we need to commit to and what we will commit to is doing a really good job and spreading our bets too thin versus concentrating on one and then starting to expand will probably be the right way. We're not a user-generated platform. We're actually investing and we're committing resources to this. So I think it might just be more sequential, but definitely I think going into the Tamil, Telugu, Bengali content is definitely on the cards.
I think we are done. Sorry.
Can we do a quick one as well here,
Yeah,
please?
one last one, huh?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the content. I'm a frequent Audible user. My question is there a plan to integrate Audible in India and Audible in US? A lot of good content available in Amazon.com or Audible.com is not available in Audible.in.
Yeah, I think improving the content selection and maybe even figuring out what the right price point is, what the optimal price point is definitely something that will be a continuous learning and expanding process. I think you'll probably see more from us in the coming few months, and definitely, if Audible.com is the bar, then how do we work with all the publishers to get there and even get better from a local language perspective?